The Crazy Bitch Gazette is a brilliant episode of 2.5 Men. This is episode 7 of season 8. It's directed by James Widdoes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. I was really excited to reach this one because, first of all, it's brilliant, but second of all, I thought it was much later on. I didn't realise it was this early on in the season, so I hadn't expected it, and I was really pleased to reach it because it's so funny. It's so fun. It's brilliantly written. It starts off with Charlie in a restaurant with Michelle, and then Evelyn and Alan come in and they end up joining them, and it's as awkward as one would expect, and Michelle has the best facial expressions. We have some brilliant dialogue. It's a really solid scene. Then Charlie is in bed with Michelle. She asks Charlie if there have been a lot of women in Charlie's bed. Charlie decides to not give her an answer, and she seems to be okay with that. And then Jake knocks on the door. And Charlie obviously says, "Not now, Jake." And Jake says, "Is Chelsea back? Mia?" And it just gets worse and worse for Charlie until he ultimately gives Jake the keys to his car so that Jake will go away. And as Charlie says to Michelle, "I'm starting to think he's an evil genius," which is something that has come up before. Jake obviously has a reputation for maybe not being the brightest, but he does know how to get his own way in certain situations, as we see here. It's then morning, and Berta comes in, and I quote, "with the shopping for the week," and the shopping is just a giant cardboard box of alcohol, and things just keep getting worse and worse for Charlie, from the very beginning in the restaurant to the scene with Jake, and now Berta. It's like Michelle is just getting this information overload about Charlie's past, some bad habits perhaps, and they're on the deck together, and he asks her why she's still there. And to her credit, she said to him, nobody their age comes without baggage, and she does seem like a genuinely really nice, very likeable character. And just as things are going well for them, all we hear is, "Hi, Charlie." Of course, it's Rose, and she knows far too much about Michelle, and understandably, Michelle is very concerned about this. How can this stranger know her name? Of course, we, the viewer, we know why this has happened, and it turns out that's where Michelle draws the line. She draws the line at Charlie's stalker. And she leaves, of course, and it's just Charlie and Rose. And Rose had only stopped by to tell Charlie that she's getting married to a man called Manfred next Sunday. And in this scene, we have some great dialogue between them as well. I really thoroughly enjoyed that scene. And then we cut to the following day. Charlie leaves Michelle a voicemail, and then Alan reveals that he's actually found the announcement for Rose's wedding to Manfred Quinn, an important figure in the fashion industry. And this confirms, because Charlie was saying Rose isn't getting married, it's not true, of course she isn't, but it kind of confirms that she must be. And we have a great discussion between Charlie and Alan in the kitchen. I really enjoyed that. They're also speaking as if Rose has bugged the house, which is not unrealistic, and it was a lot of fun. We have such great dialogue right throughout this episode. Charlie then takes some flowers to Michelle to try and apologise for the situation, and she makes Charlie question whether or not he's in love with Rose, which I think was maybe a bit of a reach for her to come to that conclusion very quickly. I don't buy it necessarily, but I don't hate it. It's not a huge deal. But what's really interesting is that Charlie admits to himself that he does love Berta, and he guesses he loves Evelyn, and he starts to think maybe he does love Rose. And just there's something about him admitting he loves Berta is so, so sweet. I think it's safe to say that the show would not be the same without her. So it was a really, really lovely moment. And we then cut to Alan and Charlie on the deck. It is now the next Sunday when Rose is getting married. And Charlie says they're going to the church just so that he can prove to Alan that there is no wedding. And we then cut to them outside the church. And Alan says to Charlie, it's not too late to stop her. And I think it's quite interesting because while I believe Charlie might have feelings for Rose, I don't... this is my reading of the situation, or my reading of Charlie, I guess. But I don't think Charlie would want to marry her and live with her and grow old together. I don't think that's the case. That's not the kind of love he has for her, in my opinion. Of course, other people may feel differently, but that would be kind of like implying it's the same love he has as his love for any of his other partners that he almost married or became engaged to. So I don't buy into it as much. I do feel like he would miss Rose if she suddenly vanished, but I don't believe, as Alan said, it's not too late to stop her. I don't think that that's what Charlie wants. And nevertheless, we approach the church and they peer through the window, and there she is. Rose is in the middle of getting married, and it's a real wedding. There's nothing they can do. So they walk away. And then it cuts to inside the church, and it's established immediately that it's a fake wedding when Freddy the minister, played by Tom Virtue, says, "And we're clear." Obviously, they'd been expecting Charlie to turn up, and the entire thing was staged. And then we realise that Rose's groom is a mannequin, and all of the guests are mannequins, which is slightly creepy, I have to say. The whole marrying a mannequin to wind up Charlie is one thing, but to bring all of the guests as mannequins, it's very disturbing. I don't want to be in that room. I find it to be very, very creepy, but it's very, very funny and effective. And at the very end of the episode, Charlie and Alan are walking along, and they stand in front of this van, which initially, if you don't know what happens next, it looks a bit strange. It doesn't look like a good backdrop. It doesn't look like it's framed very well at all, but it is intentional because they're talking to each other very briefly, and their costumes really pop here as well. We have the white background. As I said, it's a bit bizarre the way it's framed. It doesn't look great, but their costumes really stand out. The colours look great, and Charlie explains that you don't know what you've got until it's gone, which I think is a good sentiment. And they walk away, just as Alan mutters Mrs. Manny Quinn. And there we see the sign on the van for mannequins. Manny Quinn, Manfred Quinn. I loved it. The first time, I don't remember exactly whether or not I believed Rose was getting married, but I do remember how much I enjoyed the reveal of Mrs. Manny Quinn, because I don't think I picked up on it. I don't think I've ever heard of Manny as being a nickname for Manfred, so it's not something I connected. Of course, the earlier remark that he was important in the fashion industry makes a lot more sense once you know he's a mannequin. And I remember being so delighted with this one the first time I watched it, and I've seen it multiple times since then. And as I said, I didn't think it was this early on in the season, so I was very excited to reach this one again. I can't fault it. It's an absolute joy. The narrative is great. Everything unfolds well. We don't get too much information too soon. The dialogue is brilliant. It's very clever, very, very well done, and ultimately a fabulous episode of 2.5 Men.